2 recovery high schools in our area now. One of them just opened last year, and we've been working really closely with them.
Welcome to Peggy's Recovery Corner. This is a recovery podcast. Recovery from what? Recovery from addiction, recovery from alcoholism, and or mental health. First of all, before we get started, if you would please subscribe on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube, and and also share everywhere. We want to try to raise awareness and help as many people as we can that are struggling. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Robin Bergeron. Did I say it right?
You did. Thank
Okay,
you,
great.
Pej.
And Robin, you found me a while back, I believe.
Yeah, so it's been, I don't know how long ago, a couple of years, I think. I've been following you on YouTube because I do intervention work as well.
Love it.
So.
And then welcome to the corner. That's what I like to say because you are at Peggy's Recovery Corner. And you yourself are in recovery also since 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, April Fool's Day, 2015.
Okay, all right, but you didn't fool anyone. You were fooling yourself before that.
Can't change that date. It's perfect.
And what were you actively addicted to?
Let me give you a little background.
Sure.
Because of the kind of work I do, and I know what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
It all will make sense later.
Okay, wonderful. The floor is yours.
Okay. I was born in 1973. It's a
Okay.
long time ago. I'm 50. I cannot believe it. So, back in those days, I was a latchkey kid. I was given a lot of freedom.
Right.
I came from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was really little.
And what state was that?
In Washington State.
Okay, Washington State.
Southwest Washington in Vancouver. I know that my parents loved me, but what I didn't know was that my whole family was affected by alcoholism, drug abuse. I knew that my sister was starting to use. She was a lot older than me.
What was she starting to use?
She was off the rails from the time she was like 11.
Wow.
She went to I don't want to, it's not her story to tell, but she ended up using everything.
Okay, and then you?
Yeah, and so for me, my first addiction was to boys.
Okay.
I tried to change the way I felt through codependency, really. And I had my son when I was 17.
Okay.
And so, before that, because of the dynamics of my family, I tried to be the perfect child.
Okay.
I was like the hero child. So
Right.
I had a double-edged life or double-sided life, right? Perfect straight A's for most of my life. But behind the scenes, I was starting to get really depressed. So, before I had my son, before I found boys,
Right.
I was really depressed. So I tried multiple times to attempt suicide.
Okay, and were these suicide attempts cutting?
One time, but not, a lot of the times they weren't. It wasn't for attention, but it was to relieve this feeling I had in me. I couldn't let it go.
Got it.
I just felt different than everybody. And I'm telling you now, I've never talked about this in public
Sure.
like this.
Okay.
So you're lucky.
Okay.
But it was, a year and a half from when I was 13 to 15, I was just felt really alone, really out of place, even though I fit in at school.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I had friends. I had all the weird friends. I love all the weird people,
Right.
the underdogs.
Right.
And I was very competitive. I played the flute. So I was always vying for first chair. I was always like second or third, but that's good enough. So, that part of me, I hid. I hid all the other stuff, right? Both my parents were alcoholics. My mom is, over 30 years sober now.
Oh, she got sober.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so did my dad. They both had DUIs. So I ended up in a counselor's office in school, and that was my first real experience with someone who really cared and could see through me, right?
The counselor.
A counselor at the school. It was awesome. We had something like Al-Anon or Alateen kind of at
Alateen.
school.
Okay.
And then I had my son, and I thought he was going to save me. I was going to be the perfect parent, and I was 17. I ended up going to an alternative high school. I had never smoked, drank, used anything. I actually thought I'm never going to do that because of my sister.
And alternative high school means that when you're not doing well in one school, you end up. I mean, I went to one.
Yeah.
I went to a few actually. Yes. Okay.
So I went to this one because they had a daycare.
Sure.
And I really wanted to graduate, and
Okay.
I had lost half a semester because I was so sick.
Okay.
It was not a good pregnancy.
Right.
And that was also two-sided. The teachers were wonderful,
Yeah.
but I was introduced to this whole other thing called drugs.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of drugs at alternative high schools.
Before I ever smoked a cigarette, I met a friend who introduced me to marijuana,
Okay.
and it felt good.
Mm-hmm.
And
And obviously, for a person that's gone through depression, this is like excellent. Yeah.
and I had new friends. who
How old
thought
were
I
you
was
right
cool.
when you first smoked weed?
I was almost 18.
Okay, and then
So I was 17 when I moved out and got my own apartment. So I was introduced to all these new friends, and I had all this freedom. I also wanted to be a good mom,
right was the
Right.
father of the baby not in the picture?
not in a picture.
Okay,
So I had all these friends who thought I was cool because I had my own apartment.
your own place at 17.
I had a rockin' apartment.
Right.
We had a lot of parties.
This is a party spot.
It was a party spot.
Yeah.
I got popular, started dating this guy that everybody thought was cool in our circle.
Right.
I didn't know from that day on what normal drinking or, anything was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everyone used to excess, and I was like the worst.
Right.
So, one thing led to another, and within a year, I was using meth.
Okay.
It was fast.
How did that happen? The progression into meth?
Just the people I was around.
They just had it.
It was the people I was around started using it, and
Was this like the late 80s?
no, 90s, early 90s.
And was it crank?
Yeah,
It was like the jet fuel,
the dirty stuff.
the dirty stuff, biker stuff.
Yeah,
And were you snorting it?
yeah.
And then how was your life?
So I think it took me 9 months to almost absolutely ruin my life, and a couple times should have lost my child.
Did you lose the apartment?
I lost the apartment. My mom she was the landlord. She had a fourplex, so she let me come back and live there. She really did not know what I was going through. Like I told you, I was really good at covering up all this stuff, all the shame and guilt and what I was doing. And I wasn't a bad person. I knew I wasn't, but I was addicted.
Right.
And so, the last thing that happened to really get me off that was my boyfriend had a friend who robbed not a liquor store, a convenience store, and he used my car. And I let him. And when he came back to the house where we were at,
They traced it back to you.
traced it. And we had SWAT team pointing guns at us with my child in the car.
Oh.
It was heartbreaking. And so my mom, because she owned the place, got a restraining order on all those people, thinking that would straighten me up. And it did with them. But I kept struggling a little bit with other things while I was trying to get on the right path.
Right.
The short story is I was really grateful for the police because they pulled me in to question me and told me, you're really lucky that you have a mom who cares about you. And we want to see you succeed with this baby.
Did you get that at that time? Did you understand what they were saying?
I did, but I was still.
You were still in your addiction.
Yeah. And I was stupid, just stupid.
Why?
And scared.
Why were you stupid?
I was just so scared.
Yeah.
Well, I was in the addiction.
Right.
And there's nothing like meth. It's such a.
It overpowers you.
Yeah. It makes you paranoid. It makes you scared. And I didn't want to admit to anybody what I was doing.
Sure.
So I didn't. I just quit it because I was scared.
Oh, the fear that was instilled within you made you quit doing the
It
meth?
made me quit doing the meth. That didn't mean I didn't struggle still.
Struggle internally?
Internally,
Because now you've kind of had this new best friend taken away from you, which is the substance.
Yeah.
Were you still doing other stuff?
A little bit.
Smoking weed, drinking?
Yeah, a little bit, but not like the party life was over.
Right.
I was scared enough to say I want to be a parent.
Okay.
I don't want to have that taken away from me. Yeah, and then I got trained to work as a certified nursing assistant,
Okay.
and that was another thing. Like a little bit of hope, a little bit of help. I knew that I could do this. I was good at it. I was getting kudos. I was always really caring because I loved all the underdogs.
Sure. So you were a caretaker. You like to take care of people.
Oh, yeah. And so while I was there, I was taking care of a woman that was cranky. She was dying. She didn't like any of the other certified nursing assistants. So while she was passing away, I was there with her. She loved having me there, so I was almost exclusively with her. And that's where her family came in. And I met my husband because he was part of her family. So he met me, saw me taking care of her, and he was a totally different person than me.
Right.
At that time, I'd quit everything except cigarettes. I was a chain smoker. I would light one before I finished the other one.
Sure.
You know?
You smoke that much.
Yeah. And so when he and I met, he said, well, you know, these are some things I don't do. And, you know, if we're going to date, you can't do them. So I threw that pack of cigarettes away and I didn't smoke anymore.
Right.
So I had gotten good at that, like cutting out things, thinking that, oh, I'm on the right path now.
Sure.
And from then on, you know, we got married like 6 months later. He was almost 10 years older than me.
Okay.
And so I thought he was like my savior.
Sure.
And I was 22. I didn't have a clue about the world. And he didn't really know about my past. You know, I was really ashamed to talk about it. So I still had all this fear and dread and a lot of shame. Try to do everything perfect. I joined his church. I homeschooled my kid, started having more children, and ended up with 4.
Wow.
And I love them, you know.
So 3 more with him.
Yes. And he adopted my son.
Oh, okay. So kind of just, he was the father figure that
Yeah, he was
raised
a father
them.
figure. And man, I loved it. And in between having children, I would start drinking because it was just kind of a lifestyle, you know, but didn't think that things got out of hand until the last one was born. And after that, it was like life got hard. You know, I started not feeling like I had lost my purpose except for parenting.
Yes.
You know, my whole identity was wrapped up in being a mother since I was 17.
Right.
You know, and we would drink when they were in bed. We would go outside and drink, and they never saw us drink, but it was excessive. And there came a point, I'm going to fast forward because there was a lot in between. There came a point where I would mix his drinks way stronger than my own, hoping he would pass out. So I knew that our marriage was just not working out.
Right.
You know, we were married 16 years. And so I made the hard decision to leave him. And right around that time, my kids who I'd homeschooled were going into public school in high school.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, this is great. We're all going to have a new track, right? And didn't work that smoothly. My kids really, and I took a lot of guilt. I felt a lot of guilt for this. I was the one that broke up the family. And they knew there was problems. They could tell, but they never saw what happened outside. They, you know, I would wake up with a hangover and teach them math.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Yeah.
or take them to these, you know, conservative outings with conservative friends of mine.
Right.
So nobody knew what was going on. And when we got divorced, that whole community of people left me except for 2 people because they were just scared, I think, that I would influence them too.
Right.
You know, it was the best thing for me, but it was really hard.
Right.
And so my kids kept struggling, making friends, kind of doing the same thing I did. They got right into the popular crowd. My son did, you know. He ended up getting caught with the bottle of vodka in his school, in his water bottle.
Right.
Right at the end of school. And I begged them, please let me just remove him from school. Don't kick him out. We're going to figure something else out. And that worked, but he kept struggling. And so during this time, I was going through this divorce. I'm fast forwarding again through this story, but I met my current husband on an airplane.
Oh, wow.
He's from Houston. And so we met. We just wanted to keep in touch. we both had this feeling like, that there was something awakening in me, that I was returning to my roots as a kid, this kind of dreamer, and I was really optimistic. I wanted hope for the future. And so he said, yeah, I don't want to be cynical either. Like, he had a bad breakup and I didn't want to be that way either. So we just kept in touch. And over the next 6 months, we talked and talked and talked and became friends. And it was perfect because he lives so far away. The next thing is we ended up moving down to Houston. He took on 3 teenagers he didn't know very well. Looking back, I'd say, if it was my friend, I'd say, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But I think it was a God thing, that we ended up there. And I know that because of the community that we built down in Houston. We couldn't find it. When my kids were struggling in Vancouver, my son got an assessment, a drug and alcohol assessment. And they basically said, well, go get him a therapist because there's nothing else to do. Like, he's not going to qualify for treatment yet. And even if he did, there's no support.
Sure.
So I felt all alone. None of his friends' families could help either because they were the kids he was using with. And so when we went to Houston, we drove down there, my son said, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm never going to use again. I said, oh, good. 2,000-mile trip is going to fix you.
Right.
It's going to fix all of us. And so not knowing, he had drugs in the car. He was smoking pot while I was in the bathroom, and he was lying the whole time. I had no idea. We ended up going down there just south of Houston, close to NASA, and it felt really good to have a new start.
You liked it?
I really enjoyed it. But within the first week, my son came home from his brand new high school. They're giant down there, probably like they are here. Higher than I've ever seen him. I was terrified, but when we first got there, I got him plugged in with a therapist.
Right.
Even though he didn't know him very well, that guy knew what to do. He said, he needs to go to intensive outpatient, and then he needs to go to this APG. I said, what's an APG? And so that's
That's on your shirt.
That's where our story starts.
Yes.
Really is, the trouble followed us. I ended up in this really supportive community that wasn't just a 30, 60, 90-day treatment for him. It was years. We were involved in that for 3 years. Not just with him, but my daughter started shortly after that for other issues.
Again, APG stands for?
APG stands for Alternative Peer Group.
Okay, and that was in Houston.
That's where they started. So they started 50 years ago in Houston. They've also been around here.
California.
In California. And so what I found out through being part of that group is that there is a community. There is hope. And so my kids joined the group. We joined the group. We would come and have support meetings and then lots of fun activities. So the alternative peer group is to replace your old using friends
with good people, with healthy friends.
With healthy friends that are wanting to be sober. Like, that exists. There's teens out there that want to be sober. They want to change.
I'll expand on that a little bit as we get into this conversation, but there's lots.
They know that they need a change.
They're afraid before they're even getting into heavy stuff. Should I be doing this? And I'll tell you more about that, like what I see on TikTok.
Yes.
What these kids, like the things they say to me. But I still want to hear this part of what you're talking about so I can kind of expand on the conversation.
Yeah. So, so what an alternative peer group does is wrap around the whole family for years. 1.5 to 4 years, because that's how long it takes for your brain to heal from the effects of substance use.
Sure. So when you were in Texas and you joined APG, how long were you in APG there?
We were in there for 3 years.
And that means you lived in Texas for 3 years?
We lived in Texas for 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
But how old was your kid when you joined that?
He was just barely 15.
And that was your oldest?
That was my second.
Second one.
Yeah, my oldest son stayed in Washington. He was an adult.
He didn't come down there with you guys?
Right.
Okay.
So the youngest 3 did.
Was your oldest son ever troubled or anything like that?
So he's definitely not an alcoholic.
Just straight edge?
Yeah.
Okay.
I keep laughing about it because we were just talking about it the other days. He has a bottle of liquor in his cabinet.
Yeah, and he's
that,
fine.
Yeah, that has been there for years. Like, you're not my kid. That would not happen in my family.
No, I understand.
And now we're all, we're just so super open about all of this.
I think that's the best way to be.
It is.
So then your second kid is what caused you to go to APG. Yeah. You then saw this community and you wanted to be a part of it.
Well, I don't think we really had a choice. It was like, we're lost here, and this is what people are saying to do, so I'm going to go.
Okay, but you were worried about your kids' well-being.
Yeah.
At the time, what were you yourself using?
I was drinking.
Drinking.
Okay, it was different because now I'm with this man. We weren't married yet.
Yeah, the guy you met on the plane.
And he was in the Coast Guard. That was his life. Mm-hmm. His dad was in the Navy. We were in the
Drinkers.
South. People drink down there.
They all drink.
And
many drink.
Right. And so what I learned in the APG was to set boundaries. And my boundary was, I'm not going to have it in the house, but we are going to go. And, when you're at your friend's house, we're going to go and have fun.
So set boundaries as far as what? Like if we're going to try to help our kid by being a part of this group, we need to not have this stuff in the house so that he's not tempted or might even take it?
Right. Right. And just to support
because a lot of
recovery.
us kids, when we were, because you and I are about the same age.
Yeah.
I'm like 2 years older than you. And I know that just everything you're talking about is like, you tell my story. I was a latchkey child, all that stuff, right? But a popular thing that kids do is get into their parents' liquor cabinet.
Yeah.
It's easily accessible.
It is.
Okay. So you wanted to set the boundaries and not have that in the house. If you're going to drink, you're going to go out and do it.
I mean, first we locked it up in a closet in our bedroom, and we tried to figure out what to do while I was trying to figure out how to parent differently.
Right.
Completely differently. And also as a new person, I was trying to figure out my second life, with a brand new person in a new area, and everything was new. And so we would go out to a bar. We would have fun. I was trying to learn how to do that too, because that was not my experience.
Yeah.
When I drank as a kid, it was always at my house.
The party house.
To excess.
Yeah.
Until I passed out.
Right.
And there were a few times that I'd come home and I'd be like, whoa, this is not how I should be. I knew as a parent, I shouldn't be doing this,
It's that intuition.
Right. And so I would go to these meetings. My kids would have their meetings with other teens. It was a peer support program. And then the parents had a meeting. And our APG was huge. We had parents, like 30 parents in a room. It's pretty big.
Right.
And some of them were in recovery. And so I would hear the language behind the 12 steps, and they were enthusiastic. They were like, yeah, this is a good way of life. Knowing that not everyone in the room, they were like me. They were all trying different levels of their own recovery.
Different paths.
It rubbed off. So my son joined. He started gung-ho at first, riding that pink cloud. Like, I love this. The APG has a way of pulling the kids in while teaching the parents how to set boundaries and sometimes use their influence to leverage them to change.
Sure.
So it's intervention work. There's strategy behind it. It's not just a youth group.
Sure. They're rewiring the brains.
Absolutely.
For the better good of everybody.
The strategy behind it is developmental relationships.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, you're thinking about at every stage, like, how can we influence this kid? Because it's not just while he's with us. This is for his lifetime. And that's exactly what I wanted to do when I had left my husband, tried to change our lives. So it was like, yeah, this feels really good. Hearing these parents thinking, okay, here I am doing this again. I'm on one hand trying to be the cool, fun person with this guy that I really love. And we had some really deep spiritual connection.
Love
really
that.
Cool. And then there's recovery.
Right.
And I was hearing all the neurological, like the neurology, the neuroscience behind addiction. They taught us all of that. It was like the first time I'd heard it. I didn't know this stuff. Like, really, there's a reason that they're acting this way. They're not just little shits.
Yeah.
Which they were. Like all teenagers can be, but
I understand completely.
My son was like, it was bad.
Acting out.
Yeah.
Defiant.
ADHD and really popular.
Oh,
clown of the family,
Yeah.
And so,
Proud clown.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, all of my kids had some trauma. They all had stuff they couldn't deal with, and I couldn't fix it. So I felt like a loser.
Yes.
My whole life revolved around these kids. And so they helped with that. Like, I could rely on the facilitators at this program to help step in and love them too.
Yeah.
So awesome. So what I ended up doing, my son had relapsed and gone to treatment. And I remember him saying, I don't know why you put me here, because I'm just learning how to be a better drug addict.
Oh, I'm making new connections in rehab.
They're teaching me how to do it better. I'm like, oh, you little brat.
Yeah. The ones that aren't serious are going to say that. Right. And they're actually going to go through with that.
Yeah. They would smuggle in cigarettes. And at that treatment center, they had the removable tiles in the ceiling.
Was he a teenager?
Yeah, 15, 16. They would sit up there. They would push those tiles up, sit up there and smoke in the treatment center. So it wasn't a good place, but it was what was available. And
sure.
I thought, I'm just going to do everything they tell me. Yeah. And I thought the facilitator was off his rocker. Everyone does.
Yeah.
And I love him. Can I say his name?
You can say anything you want.
His name's Joby. Yeah. Joby is amazing. Everyone in that program knows him. He speaks teenager.
Oh, I like it.
Right? And so that's what sets APGs
I have a friend
apart.
like that, Pat Ochoa. He's like the teenage whisperer.
It's so cool.
He knows how to talk to them.
But I was there like, I'm going to give my teen to you. You're crazy. Like,
at first you thought that.
Yeah. And then afterward, listening and watching the magic that happens in that group.
I love that.
It was like, oh, I get it now. And then I got the bug. And one of the parents in the group, who was a therapist also, she was talking about her recovery. And I'm like, okay, I want to be like you. You seem a little saner than me, so I'm going to try to follow what you're doing. And so I started looking at apps on my phone that surveys of how much you're drinking. And I would fill it out and then delete it. Get a new one.
Sure.
Fill it out, delete it. Like, I don't believe these. I should probably be in a hospital with the amount of binge drinking I was doing.
Usually the alcoholic one, that one questionnaire, it's like 20 questions or something. And if you choose 2 as a yes,
you probably have a problem with that. Yeah. I'm not even going to say what my score was.
Yeah.
But, I was good at managing things.
Sure.
And I'm in the South where other people live that way.
Yeah. So it should be okay, but it's not.
Yeah, right. So I ended up going to AA with her. And my son's facilitator actually walked me through the first 3 steps.
Nice.
And then he said, I can't do any more with you.
Yeah.
Now I get it. But I really wanted to hang on him because he was so good. But I found a group of women in AA that walked me through, and I did everything perfectly because that was my goal, was I'm going to do this just right.
Yeah, the perfectionist that you are.
That's right.
Yeah. I just got that from you, I can tell. It might be our generation too.
I think so, partly.
Gen X is.
She told me I was compulsively self-reliant, my sponsor.
Wow.
And that rings true all the time. I have to remember that. Like, I have to ask for help.
Right.
That's my big thing. So while my kids were going through their struggles, but really plugged into this group, I was getting sober. And back up just a little bit, we got married. My husband and I got married at a hangout. So, they do these fun activities every week, 2 or 3 times a week. So we planned our wedding at in Galveston on the beach and invited all the families, all the kids. We got our facilitator ordained, and he married us on the beach. And so that was wonderful. And then I got sober. So we'd been married 10 months. I got sober, and I was like, oh, shit. How do I do this now? I'm not going to tell I've been in a group that's teaching me how to have good boundaries.
Yeah.
And what that means is I'm no longer trying to change you, but that was what I did my whole life.
Yeah.
How do I live like that? So scared. I lost a ton of weight because I would walk and talk to my sponsor all around the neighborhood with my dog. And also the doctor at the time thought that I might have cancer because I dropped weight so quickly.
Oh, that much weight, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's how nervous I was about all this. And that alerted me that I really needed to work a good Al-Anon program.
Oh, then you went to Al-Anon too.
Well, I did a little bit, but really the program, the APG, those are the principles they teach the parents.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. And so shortly after, we'd been in for a few years, I volunteered with the APG so much that I said, would you just hire me? Like, I'm ready now. I've been sober for a little while and I'm ready to give back. And so they created a position called a parent program coordinator.
Now, APG, it's a nonprofit organization?
Not all of them. And I can explain that in a minute.
Okay.
This one was.
Okay.
In Houston, there were three or four different APGs.
Yes.
In the Houston area. There were 2 recovery high schools, which I can tell you about too.
Okay.
But each APG has different locations.
Mm-hmm.
So they're set up in neighborhoods so that the people in that neighborhood, they get each other.
Yes.
And so I was the parent program coordinator for one of the APGs in 5 different locations around Houston. So I used to drive so much and talk to all the parents. It was like a super sponsor, right?
Wow.
That's kind of an easy way to describe what our role is. Just helping them learn all the principles and help them create fun for themselves too. Because as parents, we lose that. We're so tied into our kids wanting to save their lives that we forget how to have fun. And
Sure.
So we would do retreats. We would do really fun activities and get the parents involved. And the APG we were in was a nonprofit, so we did a lot of fundraising. They all got involved in it. I had so much fun. And
I love it.
we had an alumni group that dated back 35 years. So last year we had an alumni reunion, and some of those original people were there.
In Texas? Okay.
Because that's how much this program works. It's really cool. So I really got passionate. And when my kids grew up, got stable, moved out on their own for the most part, my youngest was still home. He was really resisting moving out. So COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I had finished school.
Yeah.
I was going to college when I was running the recovery high school out of my house for a while.
Oh, because everything was online? Yeah.
And those students and I would sit down next to each other and work on our online schooling because I was doing college. It was super fun. So I finished college, and I said, we really wanted to move back to the Northwest because I'm not from Texas, and I love the outdoors.
Sure.
Wanted to go back. So my husband stayed there for a while. I moved back up to Seattle. I heard that they were starting an APG up there, so I helped them coordinate and
Get it going,
especially the parent program. And my oldest son lives in Washington,
right?
Further south, so closer to Portland. So I moved to Portland to start our own APG after that because I wanted to be closer to him.
Right.
He has my grandson, so
Yes.
so we moved there, and also in response to the fact that Oregon had a brand new recovery high school, had been around a little while. They had tried to open an APG up there. It didn't work. A lot of it was because of COVID.
Right.
Just horrible. And so when I heard the struggles they were going through in Portland, completely different than what my kids went through. So my kids, and it was bad. So I told you about my son, but my daughter had gotten into Xanax, and she doesn't remember what happened to her. She was almost human trafficked. And it was the other kids in the group that found her, that knew where she was. And so, the facilitator called the guy and said, I know you have Sarah, and if you don't bring her home, we're going to call the police. And the next thing, they dumped her off in our front yard wearing hardly any clothes. I'm like,
Wow.
So my daughter's got this trauma from that, not knowing what happened, It's really interesting. She's better now. And so I have the experiences and some real traumatic stuff with my kids, but in Portland, it's different. So when I moved to Portland, and this is after getting completely immersed in the language of the APG, how they work,
Right.
it's really different. You can't just go out and hire someone off the street to work with the kids. You have to find someone we call it talent-based hiring.
Sure.
You hire based on how can they connect with this child. And if they're mature enough, you can train them to be mature enough to deal with the parents.
Okay. That makes sense.
A little bit. But they have to bring the enthusiasm.
I understand.
Right. And so...
hold their interest.
Right. And so I was learning all of that and doing intervention work. So I had done some training in interventions thinking that's the way I wanted to go, but I really wanted to start my own APG. It's not easy. So I went to a friend of mine who she had co-founded the Recovery High School in Oregon. And she helped me get a start. And now we're our own nonprofit. So we were fiscally sponsored by her for a little while, and then we got our own. So we've been doing this almost 2 years. We have our own APG in Portland.
It's called APG?
Yeah. So that's called Collective Roots APG. And I named it that because of the ties to the Northwest with the trees, but also all the metaphors that come with it of, we do this thing together.
Right.
Our roots are tied together. When you're rooted together in recovery, right? And so we named it that, and it's also a collective. I do not want this to be like my group. This is mine. It is my baby, but it's definitely a collective. We work together with the families. We also coordinate with other people in the community because I don't do everything.
Right.
We do what we do really well, and we don't leave anyone stranded. So if a kid is struggling, we're always looking at what do they need.
Right.
So like interventions, I have to have really good relationships with people I trust. And so I keep those and I take it seriously.
I don't blame you. As you should.
Yeah.
Now, the Recovery High School, the kids that come there, there's obviously requirements, correct?
Yes.
One is they need to be sober.
Well, I'll tell you our rules. So in the APG, there's only 3 rules.
Okay, what are they?
They're the 3 Fs. So no fixing, no fighting, no sexually acting out.
Okay.
So you can see what the next F is. Those are the 3 basic rules. You can come to the group if you don't do any of those things. We have had to turn a couple kids away who had shown up high, and it's really sad. But they know that they can come back.
How'd you know they were high? They looked high or you tested them?
No, we didn't test them. They looked like it. They admitted it.
Okay.
Because, to show up at a function like that high, there's something going on.
I mean, you try to provide a safe space.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned to me when we first talked that you showed up to one of the functions and people were actually coming up and trying to sell drugs to the kids?
Yeah, this is the difference in Oregon. So Oregon is one of the ranks lowest for access to treatment and highest in access to drugs. So
yeah, well, I mean, the laws changed there.
Yeah.
I mean, they legalized everything, but now I think that they went back.
So they legalized some of the harder drugs,
like
decriminalized, really.
Decriminalized, like psilocybin.
Like small amounts of harder drugs, right? Okay. But they did roll that back. We'll see what happens with that because I feel like Oregon, they want to respond, they want to do more, but sometimes they act quickly before they have the supports in place.
Yes.
So now what they're doing is there's 2 recovery high schools in our area now. Awesome. One of them just opened last year, and we've been working really closely with them because our center is 10 minutes away. Honestly, the really cool thing is one of the kids that was in the APG with my kids moved up to Portland to work for that recovery high school.
Wow.
And he's like part of our family. So it really is a big family. So we coordinate really well with them. We have big plans for the coming years. So,
and can you tell me, is the big plans to expand and grow APG high schools on a national basis?
Well, okay. So when I moved to Oregon, I got really involved with the right people. And what I'm hearing from Oregon right now is that they are wanting to start 9 recovery high schools statewide, which is a big deal.
In Oregon.
In Oregon.
This is wonderful.
And it also tells you how bad things are in Oregon, that they need 9 recovery high schools.
Absolutely. It's bad there.
It is.
I told you, like about a year and a half ago, a lady from, I'd never been to Oregon before. I'd been to Washington. I'd been to many other states. I'd never been to Oregon, but I always wanted to go. Lady found me, had me come to Beaverton. I think that's around where you are.
Yeah, it's not far.
Not far. Oh, there was another lady that was in Beaverton. Okay, but I went there and to help her son that had a fentanyl addiction, and as well as other substances. And we were supposed to go down to Portland, where I guess that's where it's happening. And I didn't realize, like, it is run down.
Yeah.
It's like our Skid Row up here in LA.
Yeah.
It's bad.
I'd actually kind of like to see what that looks like, because
It's like
compare.
Yeah, no, I'll take you myself if I can. I mean, sure. I'm on a case currently in Skid Row and MacArthur Park, and it is like a third world country. It's really bad. I mean, they're just everywhere. Everyone's on drugs everywhere, right out in the open. Right out in the open.
Yeah.
There's families that walk by with their kids and everything, and these people are just shooting dope and doing fentanyl and hitting the meth pipe right out in the open.
It's the same way in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, and I've gone to many major metropolitan cities throughout the United States, and I'm seeing it everywhere. So it is everywhere.
It is, but I mean,
Portland's bad.
yeah,
It's,
and I've
it's
lived
infested.
there. I lived in that area my whole life.
I mean, it's not. You told me like it's not even safe for you guys to go on bike rides sometimes,
Right. Yeah,
depending on the time of day. Or something.
I wouldn't go alone. There's
Yeah.
no way. And even with my husband, he's like, there's certain areas we just can't go
That's so
because
sad.
there's camps, homeless camps, and
Yeah.
they need to do better.
Now, you were saying you were at one of those events, and
Yeah.
somebody came up and did what?
Okay, so we do hangouts every Friday night. We went to the movie theater,
Right.
just a movie theater with staff
And teens.
and teens, 15 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
Going to the movie, they were offered drugs right there in front of the staff. It's crazy.
Right then and there.
Right then and there. And these kids, when we first had them, they were riding the MAX train, the light rail, and they're offered fentanyl. Like, want some, want some. They don't have to pay for it.
Free.
Free. Just so, what we do is we strategically pair up some of the kids so that they keep each other safe. They carpool together. If they do ride transit, I tell the parents, don't let them go alone, unless they reach a level where they have some time under their belt. It's just not safe.
It's not safe. May I say some things?
Yeah.
This is what's really important for me. And I feel like we carry the same passion. For one, I admire everything that you're doing and who you are just as a human being. For two, doing interventions, there's so many different modalities, so many ways of intervening on people's lives to show them there's a different way of living, and perhaps they're not, that this isn't working for you, showing them the reality, but in a way to where they know that they're loved, and then getting them on the right path. I love the youth. We grew up always hearing the youth is the future, right? And I love them, and I feel for them. And so I think about my journey, and, as you mentioned, latchkey child, which latchkey child will be a neglected child to a certain extent, and that's not the parents' fault. They're out trying to work and support, and so latchkey child just kind of raises themselves. And then who do they get raised by? We can call them the wolves, or just the people that are their friends, and they do what their friends do, and so we started getting high, and we carry trauma, and most kids carry trauma. I think anybody that has a drug addiction or alcoholism problem has some kind of trauma. Most humanity has trauma, right? Some people have sexual trauma. Some people have many different types, like abuse, physical, mental, all that. So I get all these kids that are finding me on TikTok. First of all, I didn't even want to go in the TikTok space in the first place, but I was working with this company that we were trying to get spread a message more wide, like worldwide, first countrywide and then worldwide. And I didn't realize how much I actually, after a while, wanted to be there, because I was seeing a bunch of little mini-me's, like versions of myself that were saying the stuff I was thinking when I was their age, and wishing I had someone to talk to. And so I was always told when I do my TikTok videos to just be myself and talk as I would regularly, rather than try to sell something or talk a certain way. I don't want to sell recovery. I just want to like basically give back to any community, the people that are struggling and don't even know they're struggling, the people that know they're struggling, and then even, prevention, raising awareness. And these teenagers, what they always say is things like, hey, I've been vaping. I've been thinking about doing THC carts, or I've already done THC carts. I'm 13. What do you think if I did some LSD or if I did some mushrooms? And I remember like me growing up being their age, the person that would come and kind of say the nope to dope and ugh to drugs, or was usually this guy named Officer Friendly in our area, right? And he was a police officer, and sometimes he'd come through and he'd have the little briefcase with all the drugs in him and show them to us and things like that. But like, as much as I was being taught like that's not good for you, the curiosity of a teenager and the influences of the people that were around me definitely made me want, well, what is that? What are the drugs in the bag? I mean, even as a teenager, seeing people in the streets, like homeless, on the ground, with a needle sticking out of their arm, knowing damn well, like that's a bad path. Like I will never end up like that. To think that as a teen and then experiment with small drugs that then turn into big drugs and then become that is a scary thing. So what I usually tell these kids is, listen, I'm like their Officer Friendly. I'm the last guy that's going to condone drug use. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, you should try LSD. You're 14. No, I'm going to tell you this, the cold, hard facts. The truth is that the brain does not stop developing until you're 30. So if you start using whatever, even the THC cards, even minimal weed, you are potentially stunting your emotional, your spiritual, your mental growth in the way that you think, make decisions. And if they don't understand what stunting means, it means that little 12-year-old self that you are, 13-year-old self that you are right now, you're not going to be able to mature in your life to really make decisions as an adult would, because you keep using stuff that's holding you back.
That's right.
I have countless conversations with these kids. And you know what? But like many of them, they're already afraid. They're already in fear. They're worried. They are worried, like, maybe I shouldn't. There's that voice that we have within us, that little bit of intuition that knows better. We were taught better. Many of us were taught better. And some kids, it's just no holds barred. They don't even care, right? Yeah. It's like at some point they've tried it, and just like me and you, they carry a lot of pain. They may have suicidal ideation. I know I felt the same way you did. Mm-hmm. I would often ponder in my room, what if I die today? Who would care? Who's going to come to the funeral? No one. Nobody loves me, right? At least that's what I thought. And so I often tell them, this is what I like to tell these teens, and I'm sure this is what you guys do in APG is, listen, you can rise above. You can be unique out of your group. Those people that you call your friends are lost on their path. They might have been your friends that you grew up with, but they're experimenting with things that might be temporary, right? They might stop after a while and continue going to school or chasing their dreams. But many of them that are getting into this stuff, especially in this day and age with the type of stuff that's out there that's highly addictive. I mean, these people are handing out fentanyl for free. Yeah. You know where my brain went when you said that? I thought to myself, if they give the fentanyl out for free, then those people that they're giving it to develop a dependency. And then they're going to really want more. And that's when they'll come back and they'll spend money. They'll steal from their parents or from stores, from wherever, to be able to get that. And that's the type of world we live in right now.
It's so cheap. They can go recycle bottles of water to buy their fentanyl. Sure. That's what's happening in Portland.
Yeah.
They kind of shut that down for a little while.
Right.
Yeah.
So keep doing what you're doing. You and I talked about, when I got sober, my aunt back in Montgomery County, Maryland, started an organization. It is a nonprofit called Rise and Flourish, and they educate a lot of teenagers or even people that are in junior high schools and high schools. They have a whole group of volunteers that are all people in recovery that go and they do this circle of addiction. They basically will tell their story, but also then break it down, how the circle of addiction even works. And it's not boring. I've actually sat in. I've actually gone and done some speaking with them too when they first started the organization, and it's remarkable. And then out here in California, we've got a few different movements. There was one guy that did the thing that was called Stop Before You Start. And he would have my girlfriend and I, and many of us, go into high schools. And the best part of doing that is these little, some of them are already like using. Some of them are still curious. Some of them are wondering. Some of them have family members that used. Some of them got emotional. Some of them would write us letters after. But it was like a spiritual experience to be able to have these kids give us letters, and let us show us their gratitude for coming to their schools. We've got to educate. We've got to help these kids.
So that's something else that I'm working on.
Good.
We're going to be creating a suspension alternative program in one of our local school districts. And unlike some other ones that feel punitive
Yes.
or demeaning,
Yes.
because I've heard of that too. Like, do you know why you're vaping? It's because of this Fruit Loops box that I'm holding up. They market to you, and these kids are like, duh.
Yeah. And we like the taste, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we like
So what are you telling us?
Right. Yeah. But
That's sort of like, I don't know about you, but when I was smoking cigarettes, stealing them out of my uncle's pack, I knew I was wrong. That's why I was stealing them, doing it secretively, because I knew you would reprimand me.
Yeah. Yeah. These kids these days
they're way wiser than.
Yeah. And if they're getting in trouble at school for using, they're already struggling. Most of them are already struggling. Yeah. And so we got to reach them where they're at, and also provide the family support. And that's the part that I'm really good at, is reaching them. Sometimes when people come to us, their families come first.
Right.
They learn the principles. They learn how to get their kids
getting educated in that realm.
Right. Because they're afraid of their kids. They're afraid that they're going to not want to come. And I tell them, all you got to do is get them to the door. And sometimes we'll go to their house.
Oh, that's great.
We'll go with some of the kids and say, hey, how about we go out and have a burger?
Which is amazing, because if you come with some of the kids and they're like, oh, wait, there are kids that are sober.
That's right.
And maybe that would be a better friend for me if they get to know them.
That's right. So we
need more of this.
It takes relationship building. And so
this will save a generation.
This is so much of a passion of mine that there's an association of alternative peer groups that started over a decade ago with all the founders of VPGs from 50 years ago.
Right.
They're all getting older.